Thank you very much. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Well done. You're on the final stretch. For those of you who said they wanted to join the police, okay, from my personal opinion, it's the best job in the world if you're nosy. However, I'm only 27, so it takes its toll on me. Leading on from quite a few of the things that have been discussed today, and certainly with Fiona's last presentation, I'm hopefully going to be able to show you a new initiative, and I say new, we've been doing it for 7 years, it's now been adopted by 17 police forces, to actually look at those in the criminal justice system. So like those that Jez introduced, what Fiona mentioned, what has been mentioned by other people who have been speaking today, is about how can we treat people differently to get a better result, rather than the insanity that the police force and the criminal justice system have been doing for over 100 years, and that is we keep doing the same thing and we get the same results. And that is we put them in prison, we don't rehabilitate people, and then they come out and then, wow, here we go, they go back in again. And that's happened for a long time. So we need to look at not only the people that Fiona has mentioned and that Jez mentioned, and those with addictions, we also need to look at social isolation. And this was all pre-pandemic. So we've got the Office of National Statistics that said that there's 3 million people aged 65 or over who live alone. Public Health say that 7% of 18 to 64-year-olds are socially isolated, all right? And we've got that oxymoron, haven't we, of social media. All social media, the main people who design, say, Facebook and WhatsApp and all the rest of it, when you look at their characters, they're people that introduced these things because they didn't want to go out and speak to people. So actually, they called it social media, and it isn't, so people become more and more isolated. In County Durham, that gave us approximately 41,000 people who could be socially isolated. And therefore, when you're socially isolated and you've got fear of crime, or you've got a problem, or you've got an addiction or something like that, it can lead to you being a high impact user on emergency services, whether that be the police, the mental health services, paramedics. You then become an impact on the prison services and probation and everything, and the same people keep going round and round. And what's happened is that those people become known as the pains, the people who are, oh, it's Mrs. Smeggins again, she's rung up 20 times this week. Why? Because she's got a fear of crime. And certainly over the pandemic, when we started to look at people who were making the calls, those people that on here that we mentioned, not all of them suffer, all right? Some people like living on their own. Some people actually live on their own, but actually have a very good social life. The pandemic, and what we saw was a massive increase in the demographics of people referred to us, is because suddenly these older people who were going out and doing all these dancing and clubs and stuff like that had to stay at home. And overnight we saw a 259% increase in referrals to us, because we look at different ways of how to support people. Because what we do know, and I think has been alluded to by a couple of other speakers, the criminal justice system doesn't work. It's all we've got, it's clunky, it's bulky, and it's very, very expensive. And being very expensive, there must be a better way of doing it. Because again, if we keep doing what we've always done, we'll get what we've always got. Now, if the criminal justice system worked, we'd only need one prison. And because therefore people would go in, they'd be rehabilitated, and they would then come back out and they would go, ta-da, I don't want to go back in there, I've learned a new way. But we don't. We constantly build prisons and we increase the prison population. So what Durham Constabulary wanted to do, and it was mainly the Peace and Crime Commissioner, he wanted to introduce something that stopped people getting into the criminal justice system, all right? Because if you criminalise people, it makes their lives more difficult, all right? People make mistakes. We had a very, very good system in County Durham around restorative justice, where you get partners together. But even at that stage, you've got to identify that one person is a victim and one person is the perpetrator. Now, I don't know if this has ever happened to you and you feel very aggrieved by it, but say when you were growing up, you had somebody in your class who used to really got on your wick, and they used to have a go at you all the time, and then that one day you turned round and just gave them a bit of a slap and you got caught, and everybody goes, we want you to apologise to Billy. And you're like, no, Billy's been getting on me wick for 6 years, I've been building up to this. So with restorative justice, sometimes we identified that people who were down to the perpetrator were actually the victim of long-term abuse, who have long-term abuse. And if there were problems of long-term abuse, then why should they be made to apologise or be put into the criminal justice system by committing offences? And when we looked down and we did the research, what we found was this, that County Durham is quite a small county, all right? With 90,000 calls over a 6-month period. And it says it all up there. 0.06% of the population make nearly 4% of all calls into the police. Now, they become high impact users. So what do we do with those people? It says there that 52 made over 2,000 calls in that 6-month period. And quite often it is that fear of crime. It's not understanding what they can do, and they don't have a voice. They're people who are forgotten by society. And actually, if you want social contact, you ring the emergency services, you speak to a nice person, whether it's the ambulance, whether it's the GPs, or whether it's the police, and somebody nice will come and speak to you. All right? Because on the whole, police officers are actually quite nice people. Not all of them, but quite a few of them are. But then you look at the cost impact, all right? And certainly when my son, who's 21, had to pay tax, he was furious. And you're saying, well, what am I paying the tax for? You're paying your tax for these people to be able to ring the police, the ambulance, and go to the GPs, get into mental health services, end up with probation, because it's not free. It's just that you don't pay for it at the front door. Now, if you think that those people account for 35,000 staff hours, those interactions with people that when I first joined the police, you would go to a house and your tutor, who has been in for 20 years, would say, I've been coming here every week for the last 20 years. And then lo and behold, when I retired 23 years later, we're still going to that house every week because we've done what we've always done. And you get what you've always get. And people feel frustrated, they feel angry. And then it's another new police officer and they have to tell their story again from the beginning. And it's annoying for the police officer because they turn up and they say, this has been going on for 30 years, and you glaze over and go, oh, for God's sake, tell me why I'm here today. Because the emergency services don't have the time to sit down and find out what the root cause is, so they deal with what they're presented with. So if somebody's taking off their shirt, which in the northeast means I'm going to fight you, then you're going to fight them. Nobody wants to sit down and say, oh, excuse me, tell me about your childhood, what happened to you, why are you angry today? Because you're a police officer and I want to beat you up. Fair enough, here we go. All right. The same thing with the ambulance, the paramedics. They don't turn up and say, tell me about your life story. You're saying you've got chest pains. We're going to treat you if you've got a heart attack. And we're going to take you to hospital. And it costs £3,500 to do all those tests and then to take you home again. So one of the things, I heard it on the radio a few weeks ago. This lady's book is absolutely brilliant. All right. And she said, we are born creative. Children are amazingly creative and we're educated out of being creative. All right. And so what do we need? We need to be creative about how we're going to do it. And that's what problem solving is all about. OK, because for years, everybody's worked in silos. This is what social services used to teach their social workers. All right. Information about yourself and your personal life should not be disclosed to clients. Well, how can you build a rapport? How can you tell a story about somebody? And the best one is, it's important you understand the limitations of your role and your personal capabilities. All right. And when you refer to other professionals to seek further support and advice for yourself and your clients, if you put those boundaries on professionals and you say, if you go across that boundary, you're going to get really told off or sacked, then people actually stay well across. It's like walking along the edge of a cliff. If you know you're going to fall off, then what you do is you stay well back. And nobody ever got a thank you letter for working within their capabilities. You need to think outside the box. So how can we do things differently? So we introduced the community peer mentors, and this is supporting vulnerable and isolated people affected by significant life-changing events, whether victims, survivors, perpetrators, or those forgotten by society, perceived or real, and through unfulfilled need to become reliant on emergency services. All right. A significant life-changing event is different for every person, but the main ones are death, divorce, debt, unemployment, underemployment, and things like that. Okay. Now, for one person, and I'm not belittling this, it may be a death of a pet and your life could spiral out of control. It could be your favourite uncle dies. It could be that you've been in a relationship and somebody leaves. There could be anything that you then spiral into taking perhaps drugs, alcohol, or just misbehave, or actually just ring up for help all the time. To reduce the severity and frequency on their calls, to reduce their vulnerability and empower change in the individual. And sometimes that's what you need to do, is find out what's happening with that person. And to reduce the demand on frontline services and emergency statutory services, because the stress on those people having to go to that house, to Mrs. Smeggins or Mr. Smeggins, who said he's having his 10th heart attack of the week, and the ambulance crews know that there's actually somebody who's really having a heart attack, but they can't deal with it because they're dealing with that person. So that's why we were introduced. So over the last 7 years, and I only was one of my area coordinators one time, she was absolutely brilliant. We have 6 members of staff. We have 140 volunteers across the whole of County Durham, and we've recruited people with lived experience. Because when Jim with his suit used to interview people, people would say, you don't know what it's like to be a smackhead. You don't know what it's like to be homeless. You don't know what it's like to be sofa surfing. You don't know what it's like to have the kids taken off you. And I don't. I can empathise and say, well, that can't be very nice, and that doesn't help them. However, with our volunteers, because we took a risk, we had people who could come in and say, no, I've been in prison and I know what it's like. I've been a drug addict and I know when you're telling fibs. No, I've done this. I've been homeless. We've got survivors of domestic and sexual abuse. These people are awe-inspiring, but they can sit across the table and say, I will help you. Because when people are in a dark place, you can't see a way out. So we offer non-time specific support, but everything is bespoke to the individual. And all we ask for them is that they have the will and want to change. Our objectives are, we always look at community, client and organisation to reduce that demand on the community. If you live in an area where there's somebody always kicking off, you will lose respect to the police and the council, and you will make complaints. Okay? You've got the clients who don't want to, or do want to change, but are never given the opportunity because they've been a criminal for 20 years, but they want to get off that merry-go-round. And then the organisations, we reduce that demand on the staff and therefore the assaults and complaints and the negative impact it has on them. And we wish to avoid displacement. The police are great at displacing things. In County Durham, we have a huge population of Scottish people. I have to be careful, my wife's Scottish, but she doesn't come into this story. What they used to do in Edinburgh was they used to stick all their drunks and homeless people on the train in Edinburgh. The first stop is either Durham City or Darlington, and then they would fall off, they wouldn't have a ticket, so they get charged, and then they declare themselves homeless, and that council has to house them. So Scottish police solve their problems, but they displace it, and therefore there's no point in displacing a problem. You need to solve it. Now I'm going to play you a video, God willing. This gentleman, Clive Cooper, there is a bit swearing, I do apologise. On this occasion, Clive, who is not a very nice person, as you will see, is actually a victim of crime, but he's so fed up with the emergency services, he doesn't listen. Do I just...
Yep.
Just...
Oh. If it's clicking it, supply.
The sign was the land of private there. You want to say that to me? You want to speak to me about that, mate? Listen, we will leave. You want to talk to me like that? We leave to reach. No, you want not. And you agree that. The time is called, by the way, sir. Yeah. What is that for the same thing? Trying to get me fully arrested. In public. I want to say this thing inside. He wants to get me arrested. No!
My money's on Sharon. Right. Clive was a victim of crime, and you can see the way he reacted to the uniform, because that's the way he reacted to everything. There's some great things in there. One is that the female officer actually at one stage says, "I've come here to hate you," and then corrects it and says, "I've come here to help you," but she's probably right in the first place. The other thing is that Clive doesn't listen to me, because he said, "You tried to get me arrested," and that cop said, "I wasn't here in February," and he went, "I don't care." The other thing is he threatened to get his MP, which was quite interesting because he was currently on bail at the time for leaving a voicemail where he threatened to kill the MP. But they're those sort of clients that cause a massive impact on the police and everything. So those we've engaged with, I'll quickly go through these. 56% of them are female. And when I started this, I thought most of our clients would be female, but I thought they'd be in their 70s. Those who are vulnerable and isolated. What we've realised is that actually the average age is just below 50, because that's the day you wake up and go, "Oh my goodness, the kids don't talk to me, I haven't got any partners, I'm on heroin, nobody loves me, I'm going to eat worms and I'm going to die alone. All right, this is my life on my crappy bed set." So this is where it really hits people. Now, the fact is that 73% of them have mental health problems, very similar to the, well, less than prisons. The mental health problems for females is linked to domestic abuse and sexual violence, which isn't a surprise. 41% domestic abuse. Again, it's no surprise, the same with sexual violence, that the females are the highest percentage of being the victims of sexual violence and domestic abuse. We look at over the data over the last 7 years, the females here now who are alcoholics, who have been self-harm, have been in prostitution, and they're doing petty theft, they've had their children taken off them, and everybody goes, "She's a real pain in the backside." They deal with what they presented with. We engage with somebody for as long as they have the will and want to change. And lo and behold, we can trace it back to adverse childhood experiences, child sexual exploitation, then moving on and getting partners who are also violent and abuse them. And then they turn to alcohol and drugs because they've had their kids taken off them, so they self-medicate. That's no shock on why people do that, but professionals don't have the time to drill down to find out what's going on. So the savings we've made, based on just 150 clients, we saved nearly 3,000 police incidents, 47,000 staff hours, and saved £2.8 million over a 3-year period. 56 of those people never called the police again, all right? And I didn't steal their funds, okay? Based on 415 clients, we made an 81% demand reduction, 81% reduction in their calls to the police and other emergency services, because they have somebody that cares. They have somebody that will actually say, if you want to change, you've got to make those efforts yourself, because it does come down to the individual. So I'll play you this one. This is about Laura. It only lasts about a minute or so. Laura, I first met Laura when she was 12, and I locked her up for burglary in her grandparents' house. She nicked £2,000 of their holiday money, and she then took all her friends out on a spending spree. That's what Laura was like. Laura then, because of the sexual abuse she'd had from all of mum's uncles over the years and everything else, ended up in prostitution. At that time, at age 15, 16 in Middlesbrough, the police and the approach to prostitution was that was a lifestyle choice for a 15, 16-year-old. So we used to lock people up for prostitution and charge them with prostitution. Nobody considered that it was abuse. I then got called out when I was a detective inspector at 3 o'clock one morning when Laura was 31 and for a sudden infant death, and it was her child. But our paths had crossed numerous times over the years. And then Laura came to me and said, "I heard you doing this new thing. Could you do me a favour? Can you take my sons? Because I'm going to take my own life." And I said, "No, one is because I don't like the sons, and the other thing is they need their mum." And this is Laura's story.
Okay, last year I had my birthday, 85th birthday, and it was contemplating something that was nice. I wasn't brushing my hair, I was getting washed, I wasn't saying to myself I wasn't doing absolutely anything. I was an absolute mess.
Well, I met Laura last year, 15 months ago, and I had a coffee, and then she told me a story. I just went, wow, how can anybody go through that and not have anybody supporting her or between me? Like, I take her to the SA appointments, the doctors, just to be there with her, to give her that encouragement.
Jim and Liz both helped me to get better by making me see that what happened to me wasn't my fault. Something I had no control over completely, to my perspective, because sometimes you think the police are running out to arrest people. No, I won't for it, so my life is free. My life now is amazing. I'm going to college next week. I'm starting college next week. I have 3 sons who still have the man. And all at school in the nursery, all happy. I go out a lot more on my own. Go shopping on my own. I brush my hair a lot more often. I just
And that's the different approach to stop people getting into the criminal justice system. Thanks very much.